Calendar item number 3, the City Council will unveil a memorial plaque in the City Council chamber in honor of Rick Promise of RevereTV, who passed on November 21st, 2019. Rick was well known as the voice behind Before the Council.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Before we unveil this presentation, I would like to offer any of the councils, if they wish to speak or say any kind words about Rick Promise that they may not have already mentioned. And if not, we can move over to the side and do this wonderful unveiling. Councilor Novoselsky.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, big loss, great remembrance of him and everything he did for RevereTV, for all the events that he went to, even in the condition he was existing towards the end. He did the best he could and even went beyond the call of duty sometimes, and with very large difficulty. And I'm glad I put this motion in for this to happen. And I know Bob Dunbar and the staff and everybody at RevereTV misses him. We miss him. We miss him on Before the Council. And we just will hopefully, with this plaque, we'll be able to remember him forever. So thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Guanasso.
Thank you, Mr. President. Certainly, I was just speaking with Rob Dunbar a minute ago, and part of the traits of Rick were he kept a lot of things private, and he was just a first-class gentleman. Always had a nice smile. Obviously, he had a nice voice for TV when he read the agenda. But he kept to himself about his wife's health. He didn't want to prey on and say, poor me syndrome. He didn't want that at all, because obviously you knew he was suffering a bit, and he never alluded to any ailments that he might have had. But on that last evening that he was here, I knew firsthand something drastically was wrong, and I knew that he was really struggling. Again, he tried to make the effort to go up into the room to record our meetings, and he didn't complain. And this guy couldn't even walk to the stairs, and did not complain one bit. He was talking about other things in very light conversation, as it usually was. But again, he will go down as a terrific servant to the people of Revere. RevereTV will certainly miss his efforts, because he put his full dedication in. And Rob was just telling me that he had so much sick time accrued, he never used it. He never used his sick time. He just went in and did his job without any notoriety. He just, he represents good people, and that's what he was. And we will honor him this evening, and I think this is the perfect chamber to recognize him with. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Zambudo.
Thank you, Mr. President. Rick Promise was not only was he a fantastic employee and dedicated to RevereTV, he lived it, and he breathed it. He was just unbelievable, and he would hound you when the videos were due, if you were or to come in and do your video or whatever. And he was always on top of things and very conscientious. But more than that, Rick Promise was just a wonderful human being. He was he was a Christian man, a very religious guy, and we used to share stories about, about readings in the church and so forth. And not to get into those details, but he was just my colleague talked about how he never complained about his wife's situation and how hard that was on him, and I can't think of a finer gentleman, and I truly miss him, and I'm glad we're honoring him tonight. He truly deserves it, because this was his home. It really was. He was always here. Forget the remotes, but I've been here 20 years and didn't miss. Rick was here every time I came in. It's just truly a wonderful gentleman. I'm going to miss him terribly, and it's a great loss to the city, to RevereTV, and to all of us. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Visconti.
I think the one word missing was he was a gentleman,
Absolutely.
you know, and I know the senior citizen, the senior center is going to miss him because he was always there as well. And what a great motion. It really, it's well-deserved, and I'm fortunate to have known him, and this couldn't be done to a better man. He's going to be sadly missed. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Powers.
Thank you, Mr. President. I can say with a degree of certainty that cable TV in the city of Revere would have not been as professionalized, and that's not saying anything about anyone, but he went over and above board. If he went down there to do a video during election year, he went out of his way to help you. At the meetings here, same thing, out of his way to help you. You'd see him, and as Councilor Zambuto alluded to, you would see him every Sunday morning at the 8:30 Mass at Immaculate Conception. Also a member of the Knights of Columbus. Somebody who really took a sincere interest in the city of Revere and the city he lived in, and he'll be sorely missed by not only us up here, but I'm sure by so many that came in contact with him over the years. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Sereno.
First, I want to express my condolences to Bob Dunbar and to the RevereTV family. Rick's loss is definitely a huge loss for the community, but I know for you guys it was especially tough. And what a great way to remember him with this plaque tonight. But Councilor Zambuto and Councilor Powers pretty much stole the words out of my mouth. That in addition to being a community guy, he was a man of deep faith, and I got to know him a few years back in the Knights of Columbus, and I remember having dinner one night at Domeno's with him, and we just had a conversation, and that conversation I'll remember forever with him. He was just a good and faithful man. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor McKenna.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to say that Rick was one of my constituents, and I remember the last night he was here, he was in pain, he couldn't even walk, and Councilor Giannino and I was telling him to go home, and he said, nope, we got to run the show tonight. And he tried to make it up those stairs, but he couldn't. He was very dedicated to his job in the city of Revere. But I got to say one thing, that every time he was my constituent, every time I made a motion to better his neighborhood, he would always come up and personally thank me and say, thank you so much for caring about the neighborhood. So I'm going to really miss him, and I'm going to miss that. He was such a gentleman. And I would just like to say thank you. And I know RevereTV has lost 2 people this year, Morris and Rick Promise, and huge losses to the city. And I just want to say I'm sorry. And I want to say thank you to the both of them for giving so much of themselves to the city of Revere.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Morabito.
Thank you. I'm going to share a story. So my first time behind the camera when I ran for office against my colleague over here to my left, here I am looking at the camera, and I'm giving this very heartfelt statement, and I'm talking about my 3rd grade teacher. And all of a sudden, he starts laughing hysterically, uncontrollably. But it wasn't because, he wasn't laughing at me. He was laughing because he was touched by my statement. And we were friends ever since then. I would always bring it up to him, and he felt so bad because I would tease him about it. But the truth about Rick Promise is he was a kind-hearted man. A lot of people never seen him because he was a man behind the camera. But don't let that mistake all the work that he did and how involved he was in the community. He was at every event. He was so involved in our community, private organizations, religious groups, and the reason why no one's seen him is because he was just so enthralled with taking the video, and so everyone in Revere could be part of the event or be part of whatever he was filming that day. And he made sure whatever he was doing, it was the best. So he will be missed, quiet guy, but when you talk to him, boy, he won't stop talking. But my heart and prayers go out to his family, so he will be missed.
Thank you, Councilor. And Councilor Janino.
Thank you, Mr. President. I know a lot of my colleagues have already said some of the things that I wanted to express, but it's a void in the council chamber. It's one of those things where every Monday before the meeting, we talk to him, or at every community event, you'd see him, and he's going to be sorely missed by all of us because of that presence and because his way of always being there, but as my colleague mentioned, behind the scenes and on the sidelines and as in a supporting role. He was incredibly kind and sweet, and we were talking before the meeting and saying how there's no sound tonight and the irony of the difficulty that we're having with the sound, and it's almost his way of saying, you know, it's not about me. I don't want to talk about me, because he was such a kind person that did things as a labor of love, and he really loved his job and did his job well. So he'll be sorely missed here, and my heartfelt condolences go out to RevereTV and to his family that are here, so thank you.
Thank you. And before we get up to remove the drape, I would just want to mention, Rick was a consummate professional. And like you mentioned, I know that some people probably can't hear us tonight. If you can, switch to 1071 on the HD channel, you'll be able to listen to us. But I think that's a sign from Rick. Like I said, my brother Knight. But what I'd like to do is ask the Council Vice President Novoselsky and the members from the RevereTV community if they could so kindly get up and help unveil this plaque.